Fast X is nearly with us. You can practically hear the screech of tires, the roar of nitro, and Vin Diesel growling about family.
I got family.
So, to get you hyped, let's take a look back at the previous entries in this insane franchise, and some fun Easter eggs you missed the first time around. Start your engines. Over the course of the series, we've gradually learned more about Dominic Toretto and his extended family. And I'm not just talking about his found family of Corona guzzling, carjacking, DVD player heisting friends. His actual blood relations too. Basically, anytime they want to add some spicy drama, they can introduce a long-lost brother or something. But here's one example where it actually gave some emotional shading to the series. In the most recently released movie, F9, we find out a little about Dom's late father, Jack, which, if you've been paying close attention, actually retroactively fills in some emotional detail in Fast and Furious 6, where Brian and Dom's sister Mia call their new baby Jack. See, these movies are all heart. The series also loves to bring back minor supporting characters from several movies ago, because, considering this is a dumb as rocks action series where people fly cars between skyscrapers, the continuity is surprisingly deep and tangled. Seriously, you could probably do a PhD in Fast and Furious canon. Here's a fun example from F9. The movie brings back FBI agent Michael Stasiak, played by Shea Wiggum. He first appeared in the fourth movie, Fast and Furious, then again in Fast and Furious 6, and in both movies, for different reasons, he gets punched in the nose by Brian, which explains why, when he appears in F9, his nose is very visibly broken. Now that's attention to detail.
Again?
From attention to detail to attention to detailing. A little bit of automobile humor for you there. In F9, fan-favorite character Han drives a bright orange Toyota Supra. So what, you ask? Well, this is a double reference calling back to two previous movies in the series. The colors are a callback to the design of Han's car in the third movie, Tokyo Drift, which was a starring vehicle for him. No pun intended. But the car itself is a callback to the very first movie, to the Toyota Supra that Dom and Brian build together, and which Brian drives for most of the movie. That's one for the real petrol heads out there. Though I guess you're probably tearing up the asphalt rather than watching YouTube listicles. The eighth movie in the series, The Fate of the Furious, begins with Dom Toretto entering a race in Cuba. And when he wins, cause of course he wins, he's Dom Toretto, there are a couple of nice little callbacks to the first movie. Notice the way Dom deploys nitrous to get the upper hand? That's a reference to Brian using the very same tactic back in The Fast and the Furious. Dom's car even gets a little fiery and smoky, just like Brian's did. Then, after the race is over, the dialogue also calls back to that first movie. Specifically, the first big race, where Brian stresses the importance of respect over the value of cash and cars.
If I win, I take the cash and I take the respect.
Here, Dom says he won't take his defeated opponent's car. Your respect is good enough for me. Seems Brian really made an impression on Dom. Sweet, huh? Like Furious 7 before it, and F9 after, The Fate of the Furious upped the ante on action for the franchise. Remember the big car chase scene after the gang steal the EMP? You've got all those cars racing through the streets, explosions, machine guns, you know, all the makings of a fun night on the town. And then suddenly, boom! Tej unleashes a wrecking ball, which smashes through the pursuing cop cars. A fun surprise? Yeah, and also an homage to another great car chase movie of the 2000s, Gone in 60 Seconds, which came out a year before the first Fast and the Furious. In that movie's climactic chase, Nicolas Cage is racing to get away from some cop cars when a convenient wrecking ball suddenly takes one out. Nice to see some respect across the decades. In Furious 7, Jason Statham showed up as Deckard Shaw to wreak havoc, though, in true series fashion, he ended up becoming an ally. Near the beginning of the movie, he has a big fight with Hobbs, aka Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which puts Hobbs in hospital.
I will beat your ass like a Cherokee drum.
Of course, we all remember the iconic moment later in the movie where Hobbs breaks the cast off his arm purely through the power of flexing. But you might have missed the moment earlier before the news broadcast when the character is watching a football game on TV. That's not just any football game. That's a 1993 game in which the University of Miami took on their bitter rivals, Florida State University. Who was playing for Miami at the time? None other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. In fact, he was playing in the very game showing on the screen. Which means, what exactly? Is it an alternate dimension? Does The Rock exist in the Fast and Furious universe? I'm going to need a nerdier YouTube channel to explain this to me.
Oh, I already got one.
It's kind of amazing that Furious 7 is as good as it is, considering the tragedy of Paul Walker's untimely death. The actor passed away during filming, leaving the filmmakers in a tough spot. Of course, they wanted to honor his legacy, but there were still scenes left to finish. They ended up using a mixture of CGI and body doubles. But did you know that those body doubles included Walker's brothers Caleb and Cody? They also provided some voiceover work to ensure that their late brother's final project could be completed. A bittersweet achievement, I think you'll agree. Rest in peace, Mr. Walker. Okay, now let's mix things up a bit. We're zooming back to the third movie in the series, Tokyo Drift. As you'd expect from the title, the movie is set in Tokyo, and there is a lot of drifting. Drifting, for those not familiar with the term, is a technical motorsport where drivers manipulate their cars by oversteering and countersteering so that they can skid around corners while maintaining total control. The sport was first popularized in Japan, so it makes sense that the movie was set there, and the filmmakers took it seriously. The movie features not just Drift World Champion Reese Millen as a stunt driver, but also Kiichi Tsuchiya, also known as the Drift King. Clearly, director Justin Lin was really driven to get the movie right, if you catch my drift.
You think this is a joke?
Sorry, I tried to delete that joke. Where are we going now? Back in time? Forward in time? To be honest, I don't know. These movies are all over the place chronologically, but in terms of release, we're going back to Too Fast, Too Furious. The first sequel had nearly double the budget of its predecessor, but the production still needed to save money where possible, so they reused a bunch of cars from the first movie, giving them different paint jobs so that we wouldn't notice. But we did. For example, you know the RX-7 that Orange Julius drives in Too Fast, Too Furious? It's the exact same red RX-7 that Dom drives in the first movie. Sorry to spoil the magic. Don't get me started on Santa Claus. Here's a fun, subtle little gag from the first movie. At one point, Dom's pal Vince rents a movie, which you can see playing in the background. It might look familiar. It's Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, a biopic of the martial arts legend. But what you might not know is that Dragon was the feature film directorial debut of Rob Cohen, who directed The Fast and the Furious. And that's not the only director-related Easter egg in the movie. Cohen himself actually appears briefly, cameoing as a pizza delivery driver. What's your favorite line from Fast and Furious 6? There are plenty of great ones to choose from, but I'm pretty sure a lot of us would go for Luke Hobbs saying to Roman that he'd better hide that big-ass forehead. What makes the line even more fun is that it was totally improvised.
You better hide that big-ass forehead. That was his joke.
Dwayne Johnson just riffed the line without missing a beat, and everyone was so pleased with it that they kept it in. The icing on the cake? Ludacris spitting out his drink, which was his genuine, unscripted reaction to the line. Sometimes you've just gotta roll with the punches. Back to Tokyo Drift. Vin Diesel famously didn't return to the series for Too Fast, Too Furious, but a cameo was agreed for the end of the third movie, though it was a last-minute reshoot. If you were a reality TV show fan around 2005 and 2006, though, you might have been spoiled on the cameo, because the car that Diesel drives for his brief appearance was actually famous outside of the movie. The 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner was constructed as part of the TLC show reality series Rides, and was even featured in Hot Rod magazine. In fact, it was the editor of that magazine who suggested that they use the car in the movie. The mid-noughties, man. It was a different world. The fourth movie is where the Fast Saga as we know it got started, but most fans agree that it's Fast 5 that really nailed the new formula. Part of that was the huge leap forward in terms of action, perhaps best illustrated by the astonishing vault heist. Even people who've never seen one of these movies have seen this scene, where a pair of Dodge Chargers tear through the streets of Rio, dragging a huge safe behind them, and causing roughly $1 gazillion in property damage. The thing is, that safe weighs over 9,100 kilograms, and those cars weigh about 1,900 kilos each. Math doesn't quite add up, right? Which is why they hit a truck inside the vault to propel it along and keep things on track. That's the magic of movies. We all know Vin Diesel is a pretty confident guy. He believes in himself, and he believes in his projects. So, it's no surprise that he wanted to make the fourth and fifth Fast and Furious movies back-to-back. The studio was a little more cautious though, still not totally sure the saga was going to be the moneymaker it turned out to be. So, they compromised. The films weren't shot back-to-back, but Diesel was allowed to make a short prequel film to fill in continuity between Tokyo Drift and Fast and Furious. It's called Los Bandoleros. You can watch it on the fourth movie's DVD, and, it sure is something. To close off this list, let's head back in time again, to the very first The Fast and the Furious. No, I'm not talking about The Fast and the Furious, the street racing crime thriller from 2001. I'm talking about The Fast and the Furious, the street racing crime thriller from 1954. That's right, the 2001 movie wasn't the first one to use that title. The filmmakers bought the rights to the name, though the stories aren't actually that similar, apart from there being street racing and crime thriller elements. Now, how many fans of the Fast Saga have actually sat down and watched the original 1954 movie? Yeah, I didn't think so. Did you know that Vin Diesel turned down a $25 million payday to make Too Fast, Too Furious? The actor didn't want to return because he thought a sequel would taint the first movie. Plus, he wanted more creative control. He finally returned for movie number 4, with that precious creative control, and the franchise has now grossed like $6 billion. Vin must know what he's doing.